Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Classical Antiquity Sidequest, a podcast covering topics from classical antiquity. The period of time is known for, as Edgar Allan Poe put it, the glory that was Greece, the grandeur that was Rome. Our next side quest will take us into, I think, our first review of a director's cut. And this is a very long director's cut of a movie from 2004, which combines parts of the Iliad. I'm not sure about parts of the Odyssey. Yes, in a sense, parts of the Odyssey and some of the flashback parts of the Aeneid into a bouillabaisse that we call Troy. We'll give our thoughts on that specific bouillabaisse later, but this movie is directed by Wolfgang Petersen, and I think me and the guest are both going to agree this may not have been Mr. Petersen's finest hour. We'll discuss that, I'm sure. And speaking of our guest, our guide for this side quest is Victor Lamas, who we remember from the Alexander the Great episode and our other movie review episodes. Victor, thank you for coming back on the podcast.
Ben, thanks for having me on again. It's always a lot of fun to review these movies or talk about some of these topics with you. So I'm looking forward to in-depth discussion of Troy, the director's cut, a film that I had remembered fondly, and then upon rewatching, uh, I had to check my premises that I had enjoyed the movie initially because I have a vastly different opinion of the film now, having rewatched it. This uh this film came out in the wake of the of you know Gladiator was such a success. It came out in 2000 and it won the Academy Award. It catapulted Russell Crowe, Ridley Scott. Many people love it and fondly remember it. I do not like it, but I recognized its impact. And this film was one of those many films that came out in the wake of that movie, as you know, as typically Hollywood tries to capitalize or tries to ride the wave of certain successes, right? Which is why you had, the success after Star Wars or other movies. They okay, let's see if we can, bottle this formula for other movies, that sort of thing.
Right. And one thing that I need to clarify here, I have been moving offices, and I was going to watch that again, watch the movie again, but it's 190 something minutes, which the director's cut, that's a lot. So sadly, or perhaps fortunately, I did not have time to rewatch all of it. Also, the beginning's really slow. But as I had put some notes together on this, I forgot the end of the film apparently was taken from a poem written, I think, in the third century AD, post Homerica. And so maybe not so much the Aeneid. You can look after that. I think that's a translation of something that means things after Homer. So look that up. I have not read that myself. Perhaps I will one day. I do remember, and we'll just kind of explain Troy real quick for the plot. There's not that much to it. Spoilers. Uh, Something that I really dislike. There's text at the beginning of a movie followed by a closing voiceover, which I just think is stupid and odd. And it seems like you should do the voiceover at the beginning, but we'll get to that in a minute. So you see a little opening text that kind of sets the scene. We're in ancient Greece, and there is a slow lead up to the battle between the Greeks and the Trojans, consolidation of power, giant powers, as we learn from studying the Constitutional Convention, are often to be rivals. That's what happens here. Paris steals Helen. We can talk about maybe the way that should be portrayed or the accuracy of it. There's a lot of agency issues that kind of go into that. That's above my pay grade to intelligently talk about, other than to say it's there. They skip town, they go back to Troy, and there's a refusal to turn Helen over back to the Spartans where she left. And war ensues, calamity happens, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Um, and then there's the sack of Troy, of course, at the end. Again, I said spoilers. Troy, falls. That's really about what happens in the movie. A couple of things I'd like to get out of the way on my initial take of it. I felt like this when I saw it in the theater. I did enjoy parts of it because there were some moments of it, particularly with Hector, who I thought they portrayed him as a tragic character very well. We could talk about maybe the acting of it, which wasn't, I didn't think as great. Some of the more supporting casts I thought were better and maybe should have been the leads in this. But when he was saying you can't make a war plan based on what you think the gods' signs are, I remember that line because we were in the height of the Iraq War and there were a lot of questions about the planning of that. And so I just remember that line really spoke to me at that time, um, when I saw it in the theater. So that let me just get that out of the way, but say this on rewatching it. I think this is a movie that's kind of searching for its soul and trying to pick a theme, and it never really lands on one. And it's just too much. Like it's trying to be an epic, but it's also trying to be a story about duty and honor. And it's also trying to be a story about the cost of war. And it's also trying to be a story about one man's desire, in this case, Achilles, to etch his name in history. And it's also a story about legacy. And not that you can't mix all this together, but in the bouillabaisse of a film, it just did not come out, I think, particularly well in this instance. So those are my initial thoughts. We can get into that a little bit more later, but Victor, initial thoughts on Troy.
I think I would echo some of what a lot of your thoughts in the sense that this story, and they have done it. They did a 10-part episodic series a few years ago. I think the BBC did it, and it showed up on Netflix. This is the kind of story. A lot of the stuff, these stories beg for episodic, long form, television miniseries storytelling, and this is to cover all those things that you said. It would have been better to have done it in that way. And they actually did that a few years ago. And I think I enjoyed it. I saw it once. It's probably due for a rewatch. There were some issues with it, but all of those themes to cover need more time that even the director's cut here gives it. And frankly, all of those themes that you talk about are covered so it just seems so superficial for in the way they do so. I'm trying to think of any theme that really landed of, obviously Homer in his themes in the Iliad covers, rage, pride, Achilles' pride, grief, all of those things. I'm trying to think of, occasionally there are nuggets of gold. And there are some moments in the film. I mean, you can't not have some moment or so where you have some of that electricity with, you have a competent director in Wolfgang Peterson. You have competent, actors. Some of them, occasionally, they are going to mine something good in this.
I want to say your point
Overall,
about
it was just so. It just upon rewatch, I realized how much all of it was just as I put it, it's just a big budget patina of paint over just too much plywood of just mediocrity, too much
right.
garbage.
But your point about the pride and the grief, and here I'd like to get your take on this, is as I was watching it, um, Eric Bana was okay in this, but he was kind of overacting. I thought Brad Pitt was just terrible. Let's just get that out of the way. I thought he
Yes.
was awful in this.
Well, does not play to his strengths as an actor. He
No,
he
he,
should never have been involved in this.
he was really bad in this. I thought, but I think the supporting cast was really good, particularly Sean Bean, who played Odysseus. I think that the movie probably should have been more centered around his attempts to try and because he seemed like a reasonable one a lot, like a peacemaker. Like he was the one who started convincing Achilles, hey, you need to come to this war. You need to be part of the team, be a team player. I felt that the movie should have focused a little bit more on him. And I think he actually at the end was the one who figured out the Trojan horse idea, right?
Yes.
So he gets the idea from the guy who's carving a little toy horse for his son. So I think if the movie had been about him trying to navigate these egos and the pride, of Agamemnon, for example, right, and trying to get everybody to work together to achieve this goal, I think that might have been a more interesting story. And then maybe from the Trojan side, you could have still had what you had with Hector being torn between what he knows is right, what he knows could bring the downfall of his people, versus his loyalty to his father, who's clearly past his prime, and also his brother.
Yes. The issue is yes, the reason you can't do that is because Hollywood needed, again, it was in the wake of Gladiator. They spent a lot of money trying to get all these big name actors, and then they spent probably a fair amount of money getting mid-level British actors to always fill out the supporting roles, and they're always going to be solid and do a good job. Uh, I agree. I thought Paris should have been portrayed as a villain instead of. I feel bad for Orlando Bloom in this movie. I think this movie, for all of you listening to this podcast, if you, I imagine if you've probably seen the movie, even the first time I saw it and thought that I liked it, I actually really do realize that as I was watching Orlando Bloom as Paris, I was realizing that I was watching this do damage to his career. Um, Ben, have you ever seen the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Quentin Tarantino's a much better Brad Pitt movie with Leonardo DiCaprio.
That is on my to
All
watch
right. Well, there
list.
is
I'm
this scene.
aware of it, but that is on my to watch list.
So the film, very quickly, the film is about basically a struggling TV actor, and maybe he's trying to decide if he's going to go to Italy to do some spaghetti westerns, right, to revive his career, because he has a talk with his agent who tells him like, "Oh yeah, lately you've been portraying kind of the heavies in some of these episodic TV shows about the FBI or westerns." And he's like, "And you often fight the main hero in these, and you in a fist fight and you lose, right?" He says, "Yeah, well, of course, I'm the heavy." And then the agent explains, "Yeah, this is how agents, beef up their actors versus you. You lose the fights, and down goes your reputation in the eyes of the audience." And I was watching Orlando Bloom being portrayed as such a wuss in this film, and I asked myself, how did his agent let him do this film? Because actors often have clauses, action actors often have clauses in their contracts that do not allow them to be portrayed as weak. I think what's his name? Jason Statham has that in his contract. I thought this his portrayal of Paris as a weakling and a wuss rather than devious, right? It would have been okay if he'd been portrayed as kind of a Machiavellian, devious person, a villain, and instead he was given this to portray. Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is so miscast. The only reason Brad Pitt was cast was because Achilles. We think of Achilles as a very good-looking, young warrior type, and Brad Pitt fit that role, and he beefed up for it.
And I think he
But
had a
he's an American with his type of acting style. I mean, I consider Brad Pitt for the most part to be a somewhat of a really good character actor that occasionally does well in leading roles.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is somebody who has said that about him, that he is a character actor with the looks of a leading man. I've seen that before, and I think you're right about that. But I also think he had some contractual obligation, like some other movie fell through, and he had to do this to fulfill his contract obligation. But he was not good. And your point about Orlando Bloom being a wuss, when he was fighting Agamemnon's brother,
Menelaus.
Menelaus,
Yeah.
that was, for people who will see it, for some reason they had them fight each other as if they were supposed to be champions, and they had this whole agreement about how the battle would turn out. And Paris gets his butt kicked pretty quickly, and he goes runs and hides under his brother Hector, and they call it off. And it I mean, from an epic one-on-one fight scene, I can see where that might make sense, but from telling the story, it added nothing. They're already there. You had this, and I will give the movie credit. You had this great kind of establishing shot of the Navy, the Greek Navy coming to Troy. I mean, that was a pretty cool looking shot. I mean, it would have been better if it were raining or dark out, which is another complaint that I have with this movie. It was too damn bright all the time. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
just it needed, but that scene where they attack a statue of Apollo and cut his head off, and they attack the priests and everything, Achilles' men. That was kind of cool. But you mentioned Paris getting done dirty or Orlando Bloom getting done dirty. I thought Hector was not portrayed as competently and as effective of a warrior as he was, having read the Iliad not too long ago. I mean, and we can talk about Aeneas. We'll get to that at the end, but I thought Hector should have been just out, chewing bubble gum and doing what, and he's all out of bubble gum, right? I mean,
Great, great. They Rowdy Roddy Piper reference from They Live.
exactly.
Yes. Yeah, a lot. Eric, that's another Eric Bana, which is interesting. Eric Bana used to be a comedic actor in Australia, and there are some clips of him in the 90s doing some sketch comedy shows in Australia, and he's pretty funny. It's interesting as well where they turn him into this serious actor. Um, yeah, they portray him in a very solemn, big. Basically, he's the big brother role, uh, and I think he's okay in it. You're right. I do, however, I mean, I thought they really portraying him to be this tragic hero of the movie in the sense as just like he is in the Iliad. And I think they do it. They did a decent job of setting that up, and so you really feel in the film. I remember in the theater, the audience did definitely. You could tell the audience was moved when Hector was killed, right? The inevitability of it, and Brad Pitt. In some sense, I wish Brad Pitt had been driven more by the director to be more of a, I don't know, more of more energetic, more, I don't know, psychopathic, more in that sense. In this film, he veers between. It was difficult, like this solemnity, and some of the lines just come out ridiculous out of his mouth, and then he veers into immaturity, but it does. You never actually get the sense that you get from the Iliad that Achilles really is overcome by his wrath. In this film, it's more, I don't know, it's more petulant. I mean, not even petulance. I don't know, maybe it's the portrayal of Agamemnon. I enjoyed Brian Cox's
He was
performance.
fantastic.
He chews the scene. He and Brendan Gleeson, right? The two big English actors, Brendan Gleeson, who plays Menelaus, who's just fantastic all the time. I remember him from Gangs of New York as well. They just they're always good, and you can tell they're having fun in this role. In fact, one thing that I wish would have happened if they had shown maybe, a lot of these movies don't have the guts to show the gods, right? They just don't think the audience is going to buy the gods in these movies. But I wish they'd have had the part in this director's cut to see Agamemnon's ruthlessness. The story, of course, is that Agamemnon had a daughter named Iphigenia, right?
Hmm.
And the ships are stuck on the beaches because the wind won't blow in the direction based on their their sailing technology to get them, to blow east to get them to Troy, until the gods in the dreams tell the priest, well, Agamemnon's annoyed us, but if he sacrifices his daughter to, the wind god Aeolus, then we'll make the winds. And then he basically lies to his wife, Clytemnestra, and then he to his daughter, and just like, Abraham and Isaac, he trusses her up and cuts her throat. and when he spills her blood, the winds change. I wish they'd have shown something like that. That would have been some real gruesome but stuff, right? To,
Right.
to
Yeah.
show you Agamemnon.
Yeah. And he was really good. And, that we can talk about the director's cuts reasonings or what the team said about why they changed certain things. I mean, I do think killing Agamemnon, um, I got why they did that to show the cost of it, and Menelaus too, even though I believe he survives in the Odyssey.
He
Um,
does, and he takes Helen home. I think doesn't Odysseus have dinner with them or something
right. No, and I can
later on?
understand. Well, I don't remember if it was Odysseus or if it was his son, but I one of the two did. And I'll defer to somebody who knows better, having only read it once. But uh, I understood they're trying to show, hey, this is the cost of war, right? This is what happens. And that's okay. But thinking about Hector's portrayal, he was so solemn and so sad and so like that. I think that should have come from his wife, and maybe he could have been a little more upbeat. No, I'm going to be fine. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Optimistic and but she knows what's going to happen, right? And I thought she was very good.
I thought she was very emotive, and I can't remember the name of that actress. I think
Saffron Burrows, I have it up.
I thought she was stunningly beautiful. Of all the, I thought they should have picked her to be Helen. I thought that lady, I think she's a British actress. I thought she was stunning.
Diane Kruger was Helen, yeah.
Diane Kruger did a solid job. Diane
They
Kruger's
didn't write
good.
her well, though. I mean, that was a problem. The lines she got, the parts Helen had, it was
Well,
just
that's it.
bland.
The lines that these people had to say, I don't know. There are people that know how to write this dialogue for these ancient, for movies set in the ancient era. And this one just doesn't quite it did the dialogue did not quite cut the mustard. It just there was a it didn't it didn't put me in the era, right? You do have to have the dialogue so it sounds a little bit more there's something different, right? That makes it sound like you're in the ancient times. And Gladiator, I guess, did it well. Others do it. Rome does it well. HBO's Rome. This one, it just felt grandiose but fake and cheesy.
At times, but Brian Cox did great and really,
Brian
and
Cox
Sean,
felt like a real person in the
yeah,
movie.
so did Sean Bean.
And
And
Sean Bean, yes, and Brendan Gleeson is
yeah,
Klaus. I love that line that he says, when he wants to fight Paris, he's like, "Let me do it." His every breath insults me,
yeah.
still alive. Uh, you're always going to get solid work from the Brits in these movies, right? They always, maybe it's the
And
show.
Saffron Burrows was great, but I think we could all agree her best acting job ever came in the movie Deep Blue Sea, which is a must watch for everybody. If you like bad movies, really bad movies, this movie, Deep Blue Sea, is it.
Sorry.
It,
It's got
but
Sam Jackson in it too, and there's a part
LL
of the
Cool
movie
J
that if you like or dislike Sam Jackson, you'll be happy with that scene.
and LL Cool J does the theme song for it. So I'm just saying, watch that movie. If you
Uh,
don't love it because it's so bad, there's something wrong with you on a
LL Cool J, he's the innovator. He basically invented ballad rap, right? Love song ballad rap, which no one does again anymore. So he was pretty much the only one besides being being the innovator of it. Uh,
so but she was Saffron Burrows, I thought was very good in this. And there's a lot about the movie that doesn't really come together, and it's hard to say exactly why,
let
but
me let me give you one is I think is the costumes. So this is the other thing that I sometimes see in these movies. The Hollywood producers don't, right? You invest a lot of mo money into these movies, so you have to sometimes play it safe, which is why you get Brad Pitt. You're trying to buy the opening in that sense. The other thing is the costuming. So they know that for the most part, your average person doesn't know squat about ancient Greece other than kind of round shields and the Corinthian helmet, right? And so what you see in these movies, even with Odyssey, is you see this weird to us, you and I that are, we like ancient history, but this amalgamation of technology that's out of the time period that tries to also look cool, which is why they always have the scabbards like hanging from their backs, right? Because that looks cool. You have these proto-Corinthian helmets. Everyone likes those helmets, the ones that cover your whole face. It's like that's even though even in the time when those were worn, those were rare because they were expensive. And so even the ships that they use to sail are basically triremes, which again, would not be really created for another 1,000 years. And so part of that, and then the last thing is you can tell on a lot of these costumes when you look at the movie that what they're wearing is rubber. It's made of rubber. It's basically made for a movie, and that gives it also a little bit of its cosplay feel. That's the word I was looking for. The movie feels a little bit like cosplay.
Yeah, I mean that, but I also think again, this comes back to what I was saying earlier about a movie searching for its soul, and maybe it's getting back to what you were saying at the beginning about, hey, Gladiator did well. Let's just throw a bunch of money and get some dudes together and make an action movie instead of saying, let's tell a story here. And what is a
Right.
story that we want to tell?
Right, we got to have big battles, so let's put some battles in.
There were some fireballs.
Yeah, did you see that?
There were on a
It's got my
beach.
streak continues having big balls of wooden fire, right? What's the other one? And actually, I can't remember, Ben, but did this movie have to approximate ancient times? Did it have the music with some lady wailing with like Eastern Mediterranean music with
I'm
some old
sure
lady wailing?
probably, yeah, if we
Like,
look far enough.
it's like this is 4,000 years ago, music.
If I was to go back and watch it and pay attention, I could probably find that, but I'm not going to. So I think if you're gonna do a movie like this, and this is where I got to kind of call BS here on the script writer and the director and all this. Apparently, the script writer said that when it came to deciding whether to follow the source material, I guess the Iliad, or do what was best for the movie, they always did what seemed best for the film. I think there are maybe two or three lines in the script that quote Homer. Any more than that wouldn't have been possible. I get that, but if you're always doing what seemed best for the film, I'm gonna go out of order here because this one really made me say to myself, "What are we doing here?" Okay.
Yeah.
Having read the Iliad recently, Aeneas shows up not infrequently, and he's kind of a bad dude. Like he's killing some folks. He is not one to be trifled with. In this movie, uh, Paris says, "Hey, this is my dad's sword. As long as someone carries it, as a Trojan carries it, the Trojans will always live forever," or something like that. Or basically, they'll continue. And he's like, "Hey, dude, what's your name?" And this scrawny, and I'm sorry to the actor here. I'm not insulting you. Please do not take it this way. This scrawny looking nobody just shows up and is like, "Oh, hey, my name's Aeneas, man. What's up? What's going on here? You need me to do something? All right, cool. I'll take this sword and I'll go with it."
You
And I'm
know,
like, as I'm watching that, I'm just saying to myself, what are we doing? In Latin, in law, it's quo warranto. Why are we here? Okay.
right.
What is You had a great chance to give this off to, and you had 196 minutes or
Right.
something?
Why
You
didn't
had
he show up
plenty of
before?
time to introduce this guy. And the one
It's
thing you can't do, which is then immediately, might I add, rendered meaningless because Helen and Paris then lead other Trojans to Mount Ida, which, why? You just gave the sword to Aeneas and he's going to take it and give the Trojans a chance to live. What was the point of having both of those scenes in a director's cut?
uh yes. Uh it doesn't make sense. They had no setup for Aeneas. It basically felt some as if you had some like one of those terrible Star Wars prequels where uh, Chewbacca shows up in one scene, and there's like, oh look, there's Chewbacca, and that's it. That's and it lasts 30 seconds. And in this one, it's like, hey, Aeneas, you take over, and just so there can be 30% of the audience or 20% can say, oh right, dude, isn't that that's the founder of Rome or something like that, right? That's it.
So,
But you're right. Then
yeah,
they immediately ruin it. That was done, I guess, based on the no buildup of his character. It was so someone could feel good about winning some trivia contest in the bar later about who founded Rome. And then they ruin it. And of course, they ruin the story because the whole point of the tragedy is that Helen is recovered by Menelaus. He does live. Agamemnon lives only to be murdered by his wife in the tub when he makes his way back out of revenge for, killing, sacrificing his daughter. I viewed all of that as trying to have your cake and eat it too. In other words, they want to show they felt like the audience had to earn some victory by having the annoying characters, the bad characters pay, right? We have to have Agamemnon pay. We have to have Menelaus pay. And I viewed it that way rather than having the guts to have Agamemnon chuckle as as he sails away with the spoils and Menelaus. Imagine the scene where Menelaus, Brendan Gleeson, right, ferociously is going to kill Helen and then doesn't, right? As you know in the Odyssey, Helen, he tries, he wants to kill her, and then he just looks at her and he just falls in love again and can't do it. And then he takes her back to rule again with him in Sparta. They didn't have the
right.
guts to do any of that. They had to have Achilles. I don't know. I don't know. The motivations in the movie, once you change it, it was kind of, in some sense, like the end of Game of Thrones. You have warped the story so much that in order to make certain things happen, the characters have to act in ways that make no sense or in ways that they wouldn't have acted before. And so in this film, I guess Achilles is just a changed man because of Briseis, and then he's what? He's sacking the city, but really what he wants to do is take Briseis. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, he wants to save the girl. Yeah, and I let me correct my Latin when I said quo warranto, meaning what are we doing here? It's technically by whose authority, but in my mind, I use that to say what are we doing here? Do you really have the reason or power or whatever to be here? So let me correct that. The way they killed everybody, I mean, I thought though they did a good job of setting up there's really no winners in war, which was kind of a theme from the Iliad and the Odyssey. Those changes didn't bother me so much, but then again, it might have been that given all the other stuff that I've outlined that bothered me, um, maybe I just didn't care that much about it. But I think you're right though. There could have been a better ending for Agamemnon's brother Menelaus, and but Agamemnon did go out in kind of a cool way though. Uh, I mean, he thinks he's about to take the city, and it's like, psych, you dead now.
Yeah,
So
he died at his moment of victory, right? If death was instantaneous, then I don't know. I guess I hope someone put coins on his eyes. The other
right,
thing, there's actually, and now we get into quibbles, but then plot things that you can drive a truck through. If you actually watch the film, again, the Iliad begins on the 10th year, right? Which basically is a way of saying a long time in ancient times. But if you watch the film and you count the days, and even it feels like the whole war takes place in a week.
right.
It's it's really
And they have the pause after Hector dies, right? 12 days,
right. But
don't
even
they?
then, it's not even a month. Uh, and that didn't when you when you take this movie had a few seconds that if you paused and actually tried to make sense of certain things, it didn't. So you got to keep the fireballs rolling. The other things, of course, this movie also, just like Gladiator, just like a ton of other movies, terrible, nonsensical battles with terrible generalship. For example, if you
Oh,
have the
yeah.
walls that Troy has, why would you ever take your army out to put in front of the walls with all, why? You shouldn't go out to give battle unless you're forced to. The whole point of having those walls is that you can stand on top of them and make them attack, try to get over your walls. But in this film, and again, they say, well, they raid at night. Yes, you can do that, but in this film, you have these big battles where the Trojan army leaves the protection of its walls to face an army in front of its walls. Thus, if things go poorly for them, they only have nowhere to go except for the few that maybe could get inside the gate, which you wouldn't want to
Right.
open otherwise. So it's
Yeah,
annoying.
they get caught in a skillful trap that they set for themselves.
And the only reason to do that is so you can show a big battle. You can show the usual stuff that didn't happen of masses of people rushing toward Braveheart, which I love that film, but Braveheart had started that terrible trend of mistakenly having just masses of armed men run towards each other as if they're going to collide. And Troy does that as well. The battle now, in
Uh,
reality, of course, the armies would have been smaller in this time period. The weapons, the shields would have been different, and you would have had many more. Apparently, you would have had light chariots with one person driving, so guys like Hector and Achilles could jump off, kill some guy, gather his armor as spoils, and then jump back on the chariot. But again, that would have been baffling to modern audiences, which is why they try to do this half weird thing with hoplite infantry, but that they don't actually use the tactics that their weapons demanded, right? Which is to stand really close to the guy next to you with your shield, right? In other words, they give these folks proto hoplite armor, but then they're not supposed to act like hoplites, which is to be really close to each other and not open ranks,
right.
because that's what they think audiences, I guess, expect and want.
So two things before we get to the ranking. As I was listening to you talk about what was wrong with the pace of the movie and how quickly it was kind of unfolded and how they weren't there for a long time. Maybe they should have done this movie more like the Battle of the Bulge, where you think that everything is going one way for the Greeks and they're about to win or something like that. And then all of a sudden you have something fall apart and the Trojans strike back, right? And that's how you set up the feud. You could use the feud that Achilles and Agamemnon had as breaking the spirit of the uh, Trojans who are, or the Greeks who are about to be victorious. And you could also then, in the 196 minutes of this director's cut, maybe find time to include Aeneas in a couple of these battles because you had several of them. There were plenty of moments to introduce him, right? And then
Yeah.
that could have worked a little bit better.
They could have started the movie in the quote 10th year, shown already the grime and the sort of the grinding it out kind of warfare, which that is, a siege entails. You could have told some of this stuff in flashback, and you could have started with, after 10 minutes of showing the stuff, then you could have had, yes, I don't know, or you could have started with the Achilles and just portrayed Achilles differently. And then Odysseus taking charge is trying to get everyone out of the muck, to get home. And maybe that would have been the focus. And you still could have had Brad Pitt, but you could have misdirected the audience in a way that would have been better, where the movie's not central on him, even though he's in it. but using him as the catalyst, kind in the sense where Dracula is the star of a movie called Dracula, but in reality it's Van Helsing who is the main character, and you can focus on that, and you see Dracula sporadically, and that might have been a better use of Achilles as being the draw for the audiences, but a character that comes and goes, and they could have made Achilles more of a, I don't know, a ferocious person and allowed Brad Pitt to ham it up that way. Uh,
Right. And if they could have cast Henry Fonda, Robert Shaw, and Charles Bronson like they did in the Battle of the Bulge, I think it would have worked out great.
Robert Shaw, as Shaka, swallow you whole. These monies have
What
been
a
counting, these hands have been counting money their whole lives. Quint,
You got City Hands, Mr. Hooper.
Hoopa.
What a great movie. And Seiko has a 50th anniversary Jaws watch out now if you all want to purchase that. Go to Seiko's website and do so. It looks pretty cool. Now, I don't know if I'd take it diving. That's kind of asking for bad luck, but I do think it is a dive watch. So, let's see. Should we get to the rankings of this one? Should we go to the rankings? So let's bring those up.
Yes,
Uh,
I thought I was gonna love this movie upon rewatch. I had this thing where when I was a kid, I loved the Dukes of Hazzard, and I had this memory of it. And then when we got to college, this is before streaming and all that, of course. I'm talking about like 94. TBS said they were gonna rerun the Dukes of Hazzard. So a couple of my buddies and I, we opened up a six pack. We were excited, and 15 minutes in, we realized, my God, this is terrible, and we walked away. And that's what this was. That's as I was watching this, within the first few minutes, I began to realize it has nothing to do with the director's cut. It has the I mean the non-director's cut, I would have felt the same way. I realized, my gosh, I don't like this movie at all. And I must have been really excited that they were attempting this movie, and that must have glossed over any initial things that I had when I saw it in the theaters. So it's
so
because it's the director's cut. It's the film itself is just so fundamentally flawed. So I'm ready to
right.
rank it poorly.
All right, let's remind the audience of the rankings. All around excellent movie, Alexander the Great. Surprisingly good is a Claudius. Good but not great is a Pyrrhus. Now, I've gone back and forth on what a Probus is. I think it's going to be either. I think this is kind of a broad catch-all category. It's like C on the multiple choice test. Okay, you don't know what else to go with, you just go with C. Or if you're a criminal defense lawyer, due process. That's what you're arguing. Okay. So I'm going to say it's an average movie or a forgettable movie. So maybe something it's not good, it's not terrible, it's not awful, it's forgettable. Okay. And that's a Probus. And the last one is an Ephialtes. I will give my ranking second. I will let our guest go first.
You know what? There's a word that they're banning about a lot now with AI and the algorithms on YouTube and social media. It's called slop. This this movie this movie in some sense feels like content. The way that's another word that's been coming up a lot. Content. It just feels This movie feels like Hollywood tried to serve us some content in the wake of Gladiator. Is it? But again, I always appreciate the efforts. So I guess I'm gonna give it more than Ephialtes. I'll give it the next ranking of Probus. It's just mediocre slop. Um, Even though it's big budget and it had big name actors, it's for the most part just warmed over slop that didn't have the courage to be something better.
I agree. I'm going with the Probus as well. It's not so terrible that you hate yourself for having watched it, although the ending really makes you want to scream and break your TV. But there's good moments in it. There's interesting parts to it, and I think maybe the film also suffers from its own expectations of having a director
Oh,
like,
yeah, Das Boot. I mean, he
right.
made one of the great war films of all time. Of course, that's a
Right.
very different movie.
Yeah, it is. And this goes back though to the kind of why I give it a probus is the voiceover, I think, in the theatrical cut at the end. I think the end in the theatrical cut is Odysseus saying, if they ever tell my story, let them, they're burying or doing the funeral rites for Achilles. If they ever tell my story, let them say that I walked with giants, men rise and fall like the winter wheat, but these names will never die. Let them say I lived in the time of Hector, tamer of horses. Let them say I lived in the time of Achilles. That line really falls flat at the end because you're like, what was the point of this? What did we do? This whole war was dumb. It accomplished nothing. It achieved nothing. There was no reason for this. And maybe if there'd been a sequel, you could have kind of fleshed that out a little bit. But it just fell so flat. And you're sitting there like, Wolfgang, man, what happened to you? Like, what you got Brad Pitt in the movie too, who was a big name. You got Orlando Bloom was coming off the Lord of the Rings movies, or they were still filming them. I can't remember, but you had a lot of big names, and
But
it
it's the
just
script. It's the script,
it just
Ben.
fell flat.
We often without a good script, without a good script. In other words, you can make it, you could, you're the chef at the restaurant. You can make the stuff, try to make it look good on the plate, but if the food itself tastes bad, if the script is bad, a director can only do so much. And you know, maybe he thought he had a good script, uh, or maybe as he's filming it, he just there's nothing to do but to go forward because time is money. But the
Right,
lines are terrible. As you say, the story lacks direction. But he wasn't going to turn this opportunity down, and these actors, they gotta, probably a lot of them thought they were going to have a lot of fun. Again, Brendan Gleeson and what's his name, Brian Cox, and all these guys, they probably have a lot of fun putting that armor on and this and that.
well, and Peterson had made Das Boot. I'm sorry, my German's so bad I can't remember if it's Das Boot or Das Boot, but I apologize. It's been a while since I've been in German class. He did the Never-Ending Story
Oh,
in the
good
Line
kids
of
movie.
Fire. Yeah, the Never-Ending Story was
Yes.
great and gave rise to one of the best Simpsons lines ever by Lionel Hutz. Mr. Simpson, this is my greatest lawsuit for fraudulent advertising since my suit against the film The Never-Ending Story. Uh, but you also had, he did In the Line of Fire, Outbreak. I don't think Air Force One. I vaguely remember that. I can't recall if it's very good or not.
I have a blast. That's one of those. I liked it. It has one of the worst special effect scenes ever when the Air Force One goes into the ocean. It was one of the worst CGI things I've ever seen. But overall, I enjoy it. As what's his name? Harrison, get off my plane.
Right. Well, and the screenwriter apparently co-created game. Well, I don't want to say co-created, I would guess adapted, but uh co-created the adaptation of Game of Thrones. So there's some talent here, right? But man, and he wrote some episodes for It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, including Flowers for Charlie, which is one of my favorite ones. Wow. I don't know,
Imagine,
man.
imagine if he'd had some of the dialogue with these guys acting like those nihilistic Phillies guys.
Yeah,
Imagine
especially this
around like
season.
around a campfire at night. That would have been hilarious.
Well, yeah, especially this season of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which I think is the 17th, maybe. And there are some dark, dark moments so far in this one. Yeah, this is the 17th. But yeah, this movie just fell flat. It didn't come together, man. And it's unfortunate because you mentioned Troy Fall of a City, which was very good. And we've talked about that on the podcast before. It got review bombed by a bunch of um, I'm trying to find a polite way to say something that's inherently impolite, so I'm not going to try, but just racists who were upset about the cast.
All right, because Achilles, right? Achilles
Yeah,
was
a
an
black
African
guy.
actor, right? Or a
Yeah.
British actor who was black.
Yeah, and Zeus was played by a black guy, and everybody got all up in arms about it. And instead of just looking at what a great portrayal and story this was and an adaptation, a bunch of bigots ruined what was, the chance to do more things like that. But anyway, um, that's unfortunate. But this movie, it just fell flat. It's a Probus, so we need to talk about our next movie review. Do you have any ideas for a next episode?
I do. I always bring up. I would love to promote. I think the original Sopranos for your audience. I Claudius. That's one. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Ben, but
I
if you
have.
haven't, it should be. You need to watch it before you die. It's one of the best things ever. What's another one? Um, we could, we could do a series, HBO's Rome. Maybe do the, I need, that's probably do a rewatch for me. Is there any, those are two ideas. I've always wanted to review with you in contrast, because sometimes maybe the listeners that listened to me a few times, they think I'm always sort of a stickler for historical details and things like that. No, I would put up the Stars show Spartacus as one where there are so many weird, fantastical, I mean, really like X-rated elements of it, and yet I grew to love the character so much. In other words, they got the big thing right, even if the details seemed weird or it was too heavily in the beginning influenced by the movie 300. Um, those are some suggestions. I'm trying to think of other big, ancient or medieval films that we could do that we haven't already mentioned.
Off the beaten path, because I do like your idea of the TV shows, but that would take some planning and we'd have to probably break that out.
Yeah.
I did Google, I did Google movies based in Rome, and I got a couple. I'm trying to pull one up here. Bear with me 1 second. Um, One that is off the beaten path, okay, would be Life of Brian,
Ah, okay. Yeah,
which
yeah.
does take place in ancient Rome. Something to think about
Sure.
there. This other one that I've pulled up, give me 1 second here, is called Pompeii, which
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah. Kiefer Sutherland. It's got what's his name? Kit Harington,
Jon Snow.
Jon Snow. It was just he made it when he was in just achieving stardom from Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was in its maybe second season, third season, I think. And as Kiefer Sutherland is the villain. Um,
Okay, I think my wife, I don't know if she's over there and I can check with her on this one. She has a rule, she has several rules about movies. I think one of them is if a volcano explodes, that generally makes it a good movie.
All right, so everyone, by the way, Dante's Peak with Pierce Brosnan is one of the greatest films ever made.
I'm going to text her right now and ask that. She's never said it, but I feel like, we've been together, either married or dating for about 24 years now. So I feel like that has to be a rule of hers. Let me just text her real quick. Okay. And the question will be, this is great radio.
I'm trying to, yeah. And
Hold
what's
on a
another
second.
volcano movie? I guess you could call Revenge of the Sith a volcano movie because the whole planet's like a volcano, right?
Mustafar, that is a good point. It is certainly a lava planet. So the question I have just texted my wife is, uh, do you think that if a volcano explodes in a movie, that it makes it a better movie? She is texting her reply right now, and we'll find out how well I know the mother of my two children. So we'll see. I think I think let's review. Oh yeah, and Victor, you'll like this. She said yes, and then in all caps, Dante's Peak. So Okay. So I get a gold star on knowing my wife's movie preferences. Let's review Pompeii and then let's try to talk about how to break out I Claudius and HBO's Rome.
Great.
Because there's 2 seasons of HBO's Rome, and I think we're going to need to structure that. We can't do that in one episode. It's just not going to work.
Right.
So let's talk about that. And in the interim, let's go watch a movie that cost somewhere between 80 and 100 million to make and brought in 117.8 million. Oof. That's got to be a bad Monday morning meeting. Hmm.
Well, yeah, I think Pompey was the last dribbles of the wake in the wake of Gladiator, and it was the beginning of, hey, let's see if we can squeeze. Maybe people want to see this new Kid Harington guy in a movie. Let's cast him.
All
Right.
right. Well,
So
and I will say, in fairness to Troy, its budget was between 175 and 185 million, so we'll just call it 180 and make it square. I know, right? And
I'm just thinking of today's dollars.
right, it almost made 500 million. So it's close to making $500 million, 497.4. So on that note, check it out if you want. You do, I think, have to buy the director's cut. I would not recommend
The
that.
director's cut adds, if you read like more dark, more brutal, adds nuance. That's all crap. Just watch the original theatrical, and it'll tell you all you need to know. Um, yeah, I hope you all actually I hope you all enjoy because it's the first time you've seen it, and if it's second time you've seen it, maybe I've convinced you to watch it with jaundiced eyes. But then why would you watch it? So, so. Unless
All,
you hate watch a movie the way I hate watched Battlefield Earth just to see if it was really terrible. And it was. John Travolta.
wow. Wow. Now, if you want to stay in touch with the podcast, go to the website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Check out the socials, either at Duke FB Coverage or at Antiquity Pod. Hey, why don't you give us a call, 540-632-0160. Leave a message, and you'll get in an episode. Thanks to Brent Arehart, who put this wonderful theme music together. And stay tuned, folks. More episodes are coming because, as you know, the Classical Antiquity Sidequest is a podcast without end.